2024 has seen Deadpool and Wolverine set many records, delight audiences around the world, and opened the door for the Merc With The Mouth to turn those peachy frowns upside down to R-rated smiles. Now, we step back in time to 2009 and witness the birth of the bromance and pray that it's not DOA. This week, we look to find out if X-Men Origins Wolverine is not that bad. Welcome one and all to It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades and B movies, and a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. And hello to all of our listeners in Prineville, Oregon, and around the world. Welcome to the show. If you like superhero movies, I'm sorry, because we're talking about a film that it's a little light on the super, but it's still a movie, so it qualifies. We're talking this week about X-Men Origins Wolverine, and returning to the show to go down this road from AM 640 in Toronto, Lal Rabashaw's back. Lal, welcome back to the show, man. How you doing?
Always happy to be here, Jason, and always happy to get into the trenches of superhero movies with you.
Now, you might be a little bit of a geek.
Just a little bit. The Batman tattoo says that I might be.
Right. And I have professed my geekery on this show more often than I care to admit. So when it comes to Fox superhero movies, some hit, some miss. And the X-Men films, you could kind of say the same thing about the whole franchise. There were some really good ones and some not so good ones.
Yeah. I think their hit-miss ratio is more hit than miss. The unfortunate part is when they miss by a country mile.
Oh, yes. And at least we're not learning in this one, because that was that was something. That was definitely something. And the funny thing is, if it wasn't for this film, then we probably wouldn't have gotten Deadpool and Wolverine, which is, at last check, the second highest grossing film of 2024, right behind Inside Out 2, which it's a Disney Pixar film and it's Inside Out. So I don't fault that. Plus, this is, an R-rated film that we're talking about, and it is the highest grossing R-rated film of all time. But it doesn't happen if we don't get served this first.
No, 100%. This is the unfortunate misstep that kicked off a lot of good things, especially in the career of Ryan Reynolds. Like, one really badly written performance made a complete career out of this movie for him. But unfortunately, the rotten egg spurred some really good stuff later on down the road, but it's still pretty rotten.
Yeah, sometimes you have to get through the slightly less than appetizing appetizer before you get to the main course. And if that's the case, then okay, it could have been worse. It could have been way, way worse. But we're going to find out with X-Men Origins Wolverine. But before we do, it is time to take this X film and trailerize it.
Prequels. They are the key to a character's evolution. It enables the role to evolve from a single movie outing to a franchise in and of itself. The acceptance of the past as present is slow, normally taking thousands and thousands of viewings to find positives. But every few hundred viewings, a moment of brilliance leaps forward. Now, Hugh Jackman must carry the X franchise on his shoulders back in time. Before the X-Men, before Alpha Flight, before the CGI was finished. Witness the embryonic stage of the feud between Logan and Sabretooth. Witness an early incarnation of Cyclops. Witness whatever the hell discount costume shop Ryan Reynolds went to get his Deadpool costume. No wonder it took Reynolds allegedly leaking his own test shoot so Fox would pony up that Deadpool money. Try as you might, after watching this, you might side with the friends of humanity. Hugh Jackman stars in X-Men Origins Wolverine. Rated PG-13 for Party City Gambit.
Party City Gambit got me pretty good.
By the way, if the trailer eyes sounded somewhat familiar at the start before I started to go all me on it, I'm basically taking the opening voiceover from Patrick Stewart from the X-Men films and reworked it for this, because there are some brilliant scripting moments in the X-Men franchise, that being one of them. This movie, not so much.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you ever thought about something new you'd love to learn? As adults, it's easy to get caught up in the daily grind, and sometimes we forget to make time for new experiences. Remember when we were kids and learning was part of everyday life? Now it feels like we're always in work mode. But what if we could tap into that curiosity again? Whether it's learning how to garden, picking up a new language, or finally beating your friend in your fantasy football league, there's so much out there to explore. Therapy can help you reconnect with that childlike sense of wonder. I know for me, therapy has been a great way to learn about myself, set healthy boundaries, and develop positive habits. It's not just for times of crisis. It's about growing and becoming the best version of yourself. I know I am more in tune with both my positive self, which I highlight, and my negative self, which I'm working to minimize since I began working with my BetterHelp therapist. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, BetterHelp is a great option. It's fully online, so it's convenient, and it fits around your schedule. You'll fill out a quick questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. And if it's not the right fit, you can switch at any time with no extra charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Pantheon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/Pantheon.
But let's get into who is in this film. The movie stars Hugh Jackman, Liv Schreiber, Danny Houston, will.i.am, Lynn Collins, Kevin Durand, Dominic Monaghan, Daniel Henney, Ryan Reynolds, and Taylor Kitsch. And there is quite the almost starring in this film. Brian Cox, who played William Stryker in the original X2, was interested in coming back as playing Stryker, and he was like, yeah, no, we should be able to do it with all the CGI and the de-aging, but they're like, yeah, no, we don't want to pay for that. So they went with a younger version. Also considered for the role of William Stryker, Michael C. Hall, who was best known as Dexter. And I'm having trouble seeing that one.
Yeah, he doesn't have the old gruffness to him at all. Because you think of Stryker, and Stryker is this old grizzled military man, and I don't get that vibe at all from Michael C. Hall.
No. In the role of Blob, David Harbour auditioned for the role. And according to him, apparently the producers were worried about his quote unquote lack of physique. So according to David Harbour, he was too fat to play Blob.
Which is, we'll get to it when we get to it, one of the lowest points of this movie. So I'm almost happy he missed out on that so he wouldn't have the blemish on his career.
In the role of Victor Creed / Sabretooth, under consideration for the role were Carl Urban and Gerard Butler. I kind of like both of those.
I definitely see Gerard Butler. I can definitely see Gerard Butler being a good Sabretooth. Back in the day, absolutely.
I mean, Carl Urban, too. I mean, let's be honest. Carl Urban is a fantastic Judge Dredd. I could see him in this role.
Those characters aren't too far apart on the Venn diagram when you think about it.
Yeah.
Big fighting machines. Unfortunately, they would have made him run around and do those weird pouncing things that they made everybody do in this. But I don't think either of those choices are bad. I think those are some missed opportunities, I think.
Yeah. Apparently, Edgar Wright, the director, was offered the role of Bolt as played by Dominic Monaghan, but he declined, saying, quote unquote, he wasn't a good enough actor. Would have been interesting, but I didn't mind Dominic Monaghan as Bolt. It's not like it was a big role, but you know.
Yeah, that's the perfect noise to describe it. It's like a maybe, but unfortunately, nobody that could have been in this movie could have been saved from the bad decisions.
Under consideration or auditioning for the role of Gambit, you have to listen to this list here. Scott Porter, Alden Ehrenreich, and Chris Hemsworth. Thor tried to be Gambit.
I don't see him as Gambit at all. Gambit's supposed to have this very slender frame, very very sleek is the word I think I'm looking for. Thor is more of like Hemsworth is more of like the chopper, whereas Gambit is more of like the Bugatti bike, the crotch rocket, the sporty type. Those two things do not match at all.
In the role of Kayla Silverfox, under consideration was Maggie Q, and you know what? I kind of like that idea. But apparently Michelle Monaghan was offered the role, but had to turn it down due to scheduling conflicts. Those aren't bad options for Kayla Silverfox.
No, I don't think they are. And honestly, I think she's one of the characters that was kind of saved from a lot of the bad decisions that were made here. So I think both of those options would have worked. I didn't mind what ended up happening with that character in this one. So that's actually one of my bright spots a little bit.
I will say that if I was casting the role of Kayla Silverfox, and as I was watching this, I'll get to this now because it's kind of in the almost starring section, so it works here. Moon Bloodgood came to mind. Of course, maybe best known for being in Terminator Salvation, which also came out around the same time. But I think they did well, but Moon Bloodgood would have been a good choice for that role.
Yeah, it definitely would have been, because there's an air of mystery to her, and Moon brings it.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
I definitely see that. I definitely see those two things working together.
Apparently, in the role of Wraith, it was turned down by Quentin Rampage Jackson.
What?
And the look on your face, dear listeners, if you could see it, Lyle's about to, I think his head's about to explode.
Because both him and the person, Will.i.am shouldn't have been there either. Both of those make no sense. They were just like, okay, we need a pointless cameo. Who do we got? And someone had an address book that had both Will.i.am and Quentin Rampage Jackson in it. Like, if you've seen that crappy A-Team remake.
Now, that being said, Will.i.am, petitioned hard because apparently one of his favorite superheroes is Nightcrawler. So he was hoping to play a character with similar powers. So
the teleportation.
Exactly. So that's how you get Wraith. One of the other interesting things about this film, when it comes to a casting perspective, is that around this same time, Hugh Jackman was apparently offered the role of Iron Man, but he turned it down for this.
Yeah, I've heard through the grapevine more than once that when they were doing the great, I guess, the 10 commandments of what would become the MCU, he was in very early talks to be Iron Man. I see it, but I don't. But I don't know if I don't see it because I already associate him so much with Wolverine. I wish I would have known that information in a world where I didn't know he was such a good Wolverine.
Yeah.
Because I would like to have fresh eyes and an unbiased opinion on it, but there's just something about it that strikes me as off. I don't know what it is because he looks the part and we know he can act in anything. So you would think on paper it's a slam dunk, but I don't know. There's just something about it that bothers me.
Yeah. Somewhere, I feel like this is an episode of What If, right?
Yeah.
And the Watcher is telling you that Wolverine became Tony Stark.
Yeah, and vice versa. Like that's crazy to me. I don't know. I would love to see a screen test of it. Yeah, if that ever existed, that would tell the tale. I would love to see a screen test of it.
The movie was directed by Gavin Hood, who has since gone on to direct Ender's Game and Eye in the Sky. And having read Ender's Game and seen the film, did a pretty damn good job of that one.
Yeah, I haven't seen Ender's Game.
It's actually quite good.
I haven't seen it or read the book, which is weird because usually I'm very into books like that. I was a big fan of Ready Player One, and that's kind of similar-esque on the same lines. But I know that his newer work is not as, say, discussed as what we're looking at today. So,
however, it was almost directed by, and listen to this list of directors who were in the running to direct this. Bryan Singer, of course, as well as Brett Ratner, who had directed previous X-Men films. Len Wiseman, Alexander Aja, and Zack Snyder.
Oh, thank God.
I know, right?
Oh, thank God they dodged the bullet. They didn't know what was coming. Poor buggers. So far ahead of time. Hindsight's 2020, but this would have ended up being even more brown than it is now through the color filters.
The film had a budget of $150 million. Domestically, it grossed 179 million and worldwide 373 million. But for reference, as of research time for this episode, Deadpool and Wolverine already has a domestic gross of 608 million and a worldwide gross of 1.26 billion. So it's not like it's that long ago, but yet Deadpool and Wolverine is already better than the first ever Deadpool and Wolverine.
Which is not surprising at all.
No.
Because they're not even in the same ballpark. One is taken the way it should be taken, and the other one is taken. Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
When it was released on the May 1st, 2009 weekend, of course, it debuted at number 1, making $85 million. A really, really good haul for a debut that weekend, or at least that year. Ghosts of Girlfriends Past debuted at number 2 with 15.4 million. And Battle for Terra also debuted that weekend in 12th with just 1 million. But it debuted in almost a quarter of the number of cinemas that X-Men Origins Wolverine did. By the way, X-Men Origins Wolverine only spent 1 week at number 1. The following week was knocked down to number 2 by Star Trek, the J.J. Abrams one.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
That does track.
Oh, I see what you did there. There are a number of accolades for this film. At the 2010 Saturn Awards, it was nominated for Best Sci-Fi Film, lost to Avatar, which, say what you will, I found Avatar boring as shit.
I'm not an Avatar. I don't get it. And like, I will be the one to say maybe it's me. Maybe I'm out of touch with this one. Both Avatar. I don't get it. I do not understand the hype. I understand the filmmaking is an art and the CG is incredible, but yeah, I don't get it either.
It was also nominated for Best DVD Blu-ray Special Edition Release, lost to the ultimate cut of Watchmen, which, yeah. At the 2010 Kids' Choice Awards, it was nominated for Fave Movie. It lost to, and I can't believe I'm saying this, Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Squeakquel.
Not even the first one. The second one. That's amazing.
I mean, it is the Kids' Choice Award, so, you know.
Yeah, you got to take that one with a bit of a grain of salt. There's people throwing green slime at people there, so.
At the 2010 MTV Movie and TV Awards, it was nominated for Best Fight for the Wolverine, Sabretooth, Deadpool end fight, lost to Beyonce and Ali Larter for Obsessed. At the 2010 People's Choice Awards, it was nominated for Fave On-Screen Team, lost to Taylor Lautner, Kristen Stewart, and Robert Pattinson for Twilight.
All is forgiven, Mr. Pattinson. You did a great Batman. All is forgiven.
At the 2009 Teen Choice Awards, Liev Schreiber was nominated for Choice Movie Villain, lost to Cam Gigandet, and if I messed up that name, I am so sorry, for Twilight. Lynn Collins was nominated for Choice Movie Fresh Face Female, lost to Ashley Greene for Twilight. Taylor Kitsch was nominated for Choice Movie Fresh Face Male, lost to Taylor Lautner for Twilight. Hugh Jackman was nominated for Choice Movie Hissy Fit, lost to Miley Cyrus for Hannah Montana the movie, and Wolverine, Sabretooth, and Weapon 11 were nominated for Choice Movie Rumble, lost to Edward versus James in Twilight. Can you tell it was the year of Twilight?
I was about to say, what is happening with these like 7 degrees of separation categories? Like, wow, this came out in Twilight and Hannah Montana mania.
And let's not forget Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Yeah, the Squeakquel of all things.
At the 2009 Scream Awards, Ryan Reynolds won for Best Supporting Actor, even beating Taylor Kitsch in the same category. Liev Schreiber was nominated for Best Villain, lost to Alexander Skarsgård for True Blood. And you know what? I don't hate that one because Skarsgård was fantastic in that.
True Blood was good too, yeah, so you can't really,
Both Taylor Kitsch and will.i.am were nominated for Breakout Performance Male, lost to Taylor Lautner for Twilight. Jackman, Schreiber, and Reynolds were nominated for Fight Scene of the Year, lost to the movie Dead Snow.
Dead Snow?
Yep. Zombies and Nazis in the...
Oh, yeah. Yes, I do remember this now. Yeah.
The movie was nominated for Best Fantasy Film, lost to Twilight, and Jackman was nominated for Best Fantasy Actor, lost to Robert Pattinson for Twilight. At the 2009 IGN Summer Movie Awards, Hugh Jackman was nominated for Fave Hero. Here's an interesting one. Lost to Charlito Copley for District 9.
Oh, that's a great movie. So I'm not going to fault them for that either, because District 9 is fantastic.
But X-Men Origins Wolverine, the video game,
Thank you
for Best Video Game Adaptation.
I was hoping. If you didn't, I have 2 pages of notes just on the game. That is one of, if not the best video game adaptations of a movie, maybe ever. I'm so glad it came up, because one of the best things to come out of this film was the video game.
Oh, hells yeah. But at the 2009 Golden Schmoes Awards, it was nominated for Worst Movie, lost to Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, and yeah,
I think that's probably worse.
And the movie won for Biggest Disappointment of the Year, which, you know what, I almost agree with.
No, I think that's the best way to put this movie, because before we started recording, it's like I said, is it a terribly made movie? No. Is there bad actors in it? No. Is there a lot of bad performances? Not really. But it's just the fact that it had such source material there right for the picking, and they took the direction that they took with it. Disappointment, I think, is the absolute perfect way to sum up why we're even covering this today.
I mean, let's put 2009 into perspective a little bit here, okay? And I want to take Star Trek out of the equation, because that was something else, right? If you told me that in the same year we would get an X-Men movie, we would get a Transformers movie, we would get a G.I. Joe movie, and of the 3, I'd liked the G.I. Joe movie better, but even those would pale in comparison to Terminator Salvation. There was a lot of really interesting franchises hitting the screen in 2009. And if someone just told you that all those movies were being released in that year, the movie you think was going to be the best one was probably not the one you would think at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and it was a weird time for Hollywood. We're in a weird time now for remakes. That one was a weird time for sequels for movies that had not been seen in a very long time.
I mean, I will say that when the time comes to talk about G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, I am going to defend that movie like there's no tomorrow, because I actually really enjoyed that one.
See, this is because it's kind of the situation I find myself here. When I was a kid, I really liked it until I read more comic books. And then I understood how badly everything was flopped.
Fair enough. But the reason why we are here, and aside from the fact that Lyle has fantastic taste in movies, are the critics. Over at Rotten Tomatoes, the popcorn meter, or the audience score, sits at 58%, with the tomatometer at 38%. But to zoom out a little bit, at Metacritic, the film has a Metascore of 40. At IMDb, it sits at 6.5. With Letterboxd, it has a 2.4 star rating, giving it a 48%. And at the movie database, it sits at 63%, giving this film an aggravated aggregate of the college fail 52%. Now, I want to put this into perspective here, because you really kind of have to take a look at the X-Men franchise as a whole and how this film sits in. And I'm going to take a look at Rotten Tomatoes, because that's usually the metric that we run things by. When it comes to the tomatometer, this film is the 3rd worst film of all X-Men films. Has a 38% score. New Mutants sits at 36%, and Dark Phoenix is the worst at 22%. But X-Men Apocalypse sits at 47%, and I would argue that X-Men Origins Wolverine is better than that.
I would also argue it, and hot take incoming, because I haven't told you yet, we're covering another one of those on this list on this show. We're doing New Mutants, because that's not a bad movie. I'll defend that one. I will defend that one to my grave.
Oh, absolutely. But if we're taking a look at the audience score, or the popcorn meter as they call it now, X-Men Origins Wolverine is the second lowest film.
I think it gets a lot of hate for that third act, for a lot of decisions made in the last like half an hour of this movie. Not even the last half an hour. There were some character decisions made early on that are just like, what? But everybody knows it's the elephant in the room. The absolute massacring of Deadpool.
Oh, absolutely.
Tanked this with a lot of hardcore fans.
For the record, The New Mutants is the one X-Men film that ranks lower on the popcorn meter than X-Men Origins Wolverine. Dark Phoenix is actually at 64% on that.
See, that should be the lowest of the low, below the low, in the basement, sub-basement, underneath the floor low.
Wow, that is the lowest of the low.
It's where it should be. Not because of any of the actors either. It was the writing. Everybody in the movie's good. They just didn't have anything to work with.
All right, so let's get into this. Of course, we have to start with the titular character of Wolverine, as always played by Henry Cavill. I mean, no, Hugh Jackman.
Soon, perhaps. Soon.
Hey, by the way, if you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine and you're on the internet, you already know that one scene. So I'm not spoiling anything, but I've waited long enough to talk about that. No, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Your thoughts?
See, this is the thing, because there's going to be a lot of things where it sounds like I'm not talking about a bad movie, but in this one, obviously, there's no notes. He's Wolverine. That is Wolverine. From when I was a kid to now, anybody reads the character and watches the movies, like it is a 1-to-1 comparison. He is fine. He's great. He's doing his usual Wolverine thing. Is in a level of physical shape that most human beings only dream of getting to. And if you've seen the new Deadpool Wolverine, you know what I'm talking about. The last scene of that, the man's like in his 50s and he looks like he's chiseled out of stone. In this one, you can tell he's trying to do something a little bit different, just because you are going back and you're starting in the beginning and you're doing a prequel. But there's no notes for him. He was doing the best he could and embodying a character he'd been embodying for going on a decade now. You can't really fault him. He always does great in this character. I think the reason he's been typecast and the reason he was brought back, even they built a whole movie's marketing around bringing him back, is because he is this character. There has been, I struggle to think of another comic book character that has been better cast than Hugh Jackman as Wolverine.
I mean, you could argue Patrick Stewart as Professor X,
but even that, I'm gonna piss some people off. I'm more of a fan of the first class Professor X.
I mean, James McAvoy is a freaking brilliant actor.
I'm kind of more of a McAvoy fan in that role. No offense to Patrick Stewart, obviously, like he's done enough to earn his flowers and then some. But two side by side, I'm more of a fan of McAvoy. There is no other Wolverine. Even if they do cast Henry Cavill in whatever the MCU plans on doing, it's going to be a really hard sell to ever outdo what he's done with this character.
I mean, let's take a look at the X-Men franchise to this point. And you got to start with the X-Men animated series. For 5 seasons, even though it felt at times like the series revolved around Jubilee, it was Wolverine that really kind of sold the stories and got the most interest. And then you take a look at the X-Men, the first 3 films, and yeah, they are freaking Wolverine films because Wolverine was the coolest character in the X-Men comic books. There's a reason why when he was introduced, it wasn't long until he had his own solo comic, and some of the best X-Men and Wolverine comic covers are like just freaking iconic.
And most of the big X-Men stories revolve in some way around Wolverine being the centerpiece of the entire thing. Days of Future Past, it's a Wolverine story. Most of one of the big Nimrod stories, it's Wolverine. Extinction, Wolverine. Even if you fast forward all the way up to now, Fall of the House of X, Powers of X, that just happened in Marvel Comics, that reset everything for the 6 millionth time. Wolverine, a centerpiece. It always comes back to the coolest character.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. Hugh Jackman really has defined that character in live action, and it is going to take a lot to accept anyone else. I will say the reaction and reception to Henry Cavill in Deadpool and Wolverine gives me hope, because I think
It
people
does.
realize that after 24 years of playing this character, you have to, X-Men came out in 2000. That's 24 years of the same character. And he has treated it always with professionalism, and he's brought his all, and he made geek culture kind of cool again on the big screen.
If it wasn't for him and those X-Men movies and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, we would not have the MCU and Disney Marvel Odyssey that we have today. Simple as that.
Oh, absolutely. And the problem, though, is that there are characters that you want to see come to life. And when you're taking a look at a film like this, it's like, okay, we got to start bringing in some of these characters. We got to diversify the on-screen roster at some point. But it's still a Wolverine film, and it should be around Wolverine. No matter how excited you are about any other characters that are in this, but it's Hugh Jackman, and he does anchor it as well as he possibly can.
Yeah, and that's pretty well. That's pretty well. Like I said, if there's one thing you can at least walk away from this with saying, Wolverine was played fantastically.
Liev Schreiber, who comes into the franchise as Victor Creed / Sabretooth. Not Tyler Mane as it was in the first X-Men film. Your thoughts?
See, I'm a fan of his. And that's the thing. I'm a fan of his retroactively because, of course, back when I first saw it, I didn't, know who he was and know all the things that he did or would go on to do. But I'm actually a big fan of Ray Donovan. I think that show's fantastic, and he's amazing in it. It just doesn't feel like Sabretooth. I don't know. I'm not expecting him to come out with the big teeth and just like acting like a big animal all the time. He plays a really good character here, a really good villain, good kind of brother energy going on between the two, especially toward the end when they decide to team up and he's like, after this, we're finished. And then Sabretooth says, we're never finished, we're brothers. There's a couple good moments, but he never feels like Sabretooth, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, yes, Tyler Mane had the look down pat in the first X-Men film. I give you that entirely. And it's not like he's a miscast. I mean, that was Vinnie Jones as Juggernaut in X-Men The Last Stand.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm sorry, X-Men fans, that I had to bring that up. But, and again, maybe this is because I kind of grew up on the X-Men cartoon. But to me, Victor Creed is not Logan's brother. He's the son of Graydon Creed.
Exactly.
Friends of Humanity.
And that's when we get into, like I said, not a bad movie, no bad actors, but real bad decisions. And that is one of them. Right from the opening credits, when we get the war flashbacks of somehow, first of all, Sabretooth having Wolverine's healing factor wasn't a thing. Both of them fighting in several different wars on opposite sides, somehow going up to them working together for the American military at the beginning of the movie. It just, there's certain decisions where it's like, you didn't have to do that.
No.
Like, just show me Wolverine fighting in those wars, because James Howlett did fight in World War II, not the American Revolutionary War like it shows in this for some reason. But that's one of the decisions I just don't get. Why make them brothers?
Yeah. I mean, that'd be like having, Optimus Prime working with Sir Lancelot or something like that.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. And you could tell it's because they were trying to set stuff up later on for them to like half bury the hatchet, or for them to be some reason for them to be like chill at the end of it. But there's just ways you could have gone about it that was comic accurate, that makes sense, because it's happened in the books before that they've kind of buried the hatchet a little bit. But for them to just go, oh, nope, they're brothers, and then try to shoehorn a bunch of random things in to make it fit the Wolverine origin that's already there, like like I said, it just doesn't make any sense. It's one of those decisions where I was watching it on the rewatch and just like, why? You had so much at your disposal here. How did it come to this?
Yeah. I mean, also, how have the movies not really tapped into the Friends of Humanity angle?
At all. They just, Stryker is just working on something in private to try to help either save or kill his son. It's very kind of ambiguous about what he wants to do there. But there's no real overarching reason for why he's experimenting on these mutants.
Yeah.
Like It says he wants to make super soldiers and stuff like that, and that's the obvious go-to for most any superhero movie. But why? Who's to what end? What do you plan on doing with these people once you have their powers stolen?
Yeah. And really, I mean, we did get at least a little bit of fighting between Wolverine and Sabretooth, better than we had in the first X-Men film. I'll give you that. But, you know,
But not much more.
no.
That's one of the notes I have, is that both of the times these two fight, it only lasts like 30 seconds. One of them in the logging yard that ends with, Wolverine getting squished by a piece of wood, and the other one is the final fight, which they only really throw 2 or 3 blows, and then I don't want to call it Deadpool, whatever the abomination that Ryan Reynolds was playing shows up, and then they fight him together. So they set it up throughout the entire movie that these two are like sworn enemies, but they never really have the big blowout brawl that you want to see more than anything.
Danny Houston, who played William Stryker, I mean, obviously had changed from Brian Cox in an effort to save money so you didn't have to do the digital de-aging, but not a bad choice to take on the role.
Absolutely not. He's fantastic in a lot of things that he's been in. I'm a huge fan of him in Succession, but more so going back. And like I said, it's really nice to go back to a movie where now I've seen them in many things coming up till now. Absolutely fantastic in American Horror Story Freak Show, where he plays the person who makes the prosthetic limbs. Fantastic in that. Fantastic. One of the bright spots of an amazing season of an amazing show.
Yeah. And the thing is, with William Stryker, we've met him, so we already know what's going to happen. And I'm fine with them, redoing the whole adamantium bonding scene, because we really only got that in flashback in X2 X-Men United. This kind of puts a nice little bow on that. And by the way, if you've read the Wolverine prose series, you also get a lot of that in the Wolverine Weapon X book. Fantastic read, by the way. But yeah, William Stryker feels like he's in good hands with this one.
Yeah, incredible actor. I think he came to play and did as good as he could with the script he was given. Like I said, it's just a shame that the decisions made around the characters that he had to bounce off of weren't done better, because I think the overall plot even makes sense and is good. He does a great job of being really unlikable and likable at the same time. He was one of the bright spots of the movie for me.
Are you ready for this?
Okay.
Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool.
It's not Deadpool. I don't know what it is. We're not calling it Deadpool.
Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson. Your thoughts?
There's too many. My brain's stuttering. I don't know what happened. That's literally in big capital letters. This is what I have written on my notes. I don't understand what happened. I don't know if it was because Fox didn't think they could get away with what Deadpool was and not push that PG-13 too far. I don't know if they had another villain written and then suddenly at the bottom of the ninth said we have to switch it up. I don't know if they just wanted to give Ryan Reynolds a job. He was from Canada and they picked the other X-Men from Canada. I have no idea what happened here. You took a character that is known for being extremely dark, but extremely funny at the same time. The Merc with a Mouth. You reference that at the beginning of the movie. One of the first lines they get together is Hugh Jackman going, "I wish we could find a way to shut you up." You get the setup for it. They know what they're doing. They know what character you expect to come out of this. They take away the wisecracking. They take away any semblance of character to him at all by making him not be able to talk. And they make him just this like final boss, bullet sponge, walking weapon type deal. You have so many characters in the Wolverine Rogues Gallery that play off that exact same thing. Omega Red, Nimrod, just a Silver Samurai, anything. You had a whole 50 years worth of villains to go back, and you wouldn't have had to ruin them like this. Take somebody, change the origin a little bit and make it so Stryker makes Omega Red instead. Who cares? You've already done a whole bunch of other stuff and thrown it away. Why take a character that's known for certain aspects and remove all of them? I don't get it.
I mean, it's not like they took in Secret Invasion Gaia and said, "Oh yes, she's a pool of all these different powers. She's the Deadpool." No, just no.
No, it's Yeah, because that's where they got the name, right? It's all the pool of all the powers they took from other people and turned it into. There's no mention of the cancer. There's no mention of him joining the Weapon X program for that. It's so backwards. I don't get it. I really don't. And I think it must have been something to do with, like I said, them not wanting to go full Deadpool. Maybe they didn't think it was the right feel for the movie, because I kind of think that on watching it, Deadpool as we know him, showing up cracking wise, breaking the fourth wall, it wouldn't have worked in this movie.
Oh, no.
The tone wouldn't have fit. So why do it at all? Why cast Ryan Reynolds as that character? To cast him as somebody else. There's so many other people you could have gone with, and instead we get like a neutered version of a fan favorite.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of the name coming from the idea that they've pooled the mutant powers together, this is on a level of writing of someone sitting there saying, his mother's name is Martha, and his mother's name is Martha.
Don't do this to me. Don't you do this to me right now. Don't bring that up. Not that shall not be named.
Oh, this is on a Save Martha level of writing.
I think it is. I do think it is. Maybe not to the level of that ruins. You know what it is? That is the exact same level, because as soon as that happens, it ruins the whole movie. It was a solid 7 out of 10 until the last 30 minutes.
The biggest egregious problem with this is, though, and we've talked about this before, how DC freaking rules when it came to animated movies, straight to DVD. Marvel did it right too at times. And in 2009, there was a DVD release that came out called Hulk Versus.
Yep.
And it was two different stories. One of them was Hulk versus Wolverine, which had Omega Red. It had Lady Deathstrike, and it had Deadpool. The proper way to do Deadpool. This should have been it.
It's so easy. And we've said this 100 times covering these superhero movies. It's right there. It's written for you. Like, if you're a filmmaker and you're making a movie like this, especially back then when there isn't as much like precedent set, there's not 30 Marvel movies that are amazing and you're trying to compete with them. You have a color by numbers in front of you. All right. You have all the money. You have all the actors. You have everything in place. You have the characters already written for you. In front of you, you have 50 years of Marvel comics spread out in front of you. Just pick one. You don't have to reinvent the wheel for your first kick at it. Just do what's already been laid out for you. So I'll never understand this decision. And it is one that tanks the entire likability of the movie, because the entire time you're watching it, you're just waiting for no mouth Deadpool.
And that's the weird thing, is that even in Hulk Versus, and I recognize that I'm talking about an animated film, so bear with me here. Even in Hulk Versus, Deadpool still feels like Deadpool, even though he doesn't break the fourth wall. He's not like Ryan Reynolds in Deadpool versus Wolverine kind of crazy, but the one-liners work. They had the perfect tonality for Deadpool as voiced by Nolan North in that animated feature, that they could have taken that template and put that into this film, and it would have worked with Ryan Reynolds.
100%. 100%. And that's what I mean. They already have it there. They know what they're doing. They joke about what they're doing. They wrote jokes into the script before it happens to him, about him getting like, I wish someone would be able to shut you up, and like how he always is wisecracker and stuff like that. And it's just, I don't understand what the thought process was. It might have been somebody trying to do something different just for the sake of saying they did something different to put their own stamp on it. But there's just some things you can't change about characters. It's like making Magneto not control metal and making him control wood instead, and then joking about it.
Taylor Kitsch as Remy LeBeau. It's interesting that we're talking about Gambit now in 2024.
If you're a Gambit fan, it's been a banger year for you right now. Between X-Men 97 and Deadpool and Wolverine, it's a very good time to be a specifically Gambit fan.
So I'm going to ask you, Taylor Kitsch, did he make a name for himself?
I think he did pretty good. We don't see him as much as I remember seeing him. He's very much a third act play. But I did have written down that one of the better fight scenes in the movie was the scene where Logan is questioning him in the bar, and he just takes out the deck of cards and starts firing at him because he thinks he's with Stryker. Unfortunately, it's just not a big enough sample size to say if it would have been like a game changer or not if he would have had another crack at the role. I will say one of the dumbest moments in this movie. They step out of the bar. Wolverine gives him the elbow to the face because Sabretooth shows up. 30 seconds later, after him and Sabretooth start to fight, Gambit has somehow made it to the roof of a building and helicopters down with his bow staff like it's a video game, and that's his hover move. And he literally, like, you hear the sound effect, like, and he flies down with the bow staff spinning above his head. Laughed out loud for all the wrong reasons.
I mean, there are moments in this movie where you can see they're doing some very comic book, or at least comic book inspired or animated series inspired type moves. And the whole twirling of the staff to do a short drop down. I mean, it's kind of on the line of when Wolverine was trying to like chop away at the fire escape with his claws. That felt very much like it came straight out of the comic books.
Or when he was freeing the mutants from their cages and all of their locks just so happened to be on a straight line down the hallway so he could do the cool extend his arms and run and have the sparks fly. There is a couple times you're like, you're trying real hard here to be campy.
Yeah, Wolverine as Naruto.
Yeah, basically 100%.
But the interesting though is that you have Gambit involved with the rescuing of the mutants from Alkali Lake. And it kind of parallels from the animated series where it's Gambit who helps Storm and Jubilee rescue some of them from, I think it's Genosha or wherever they had to go and rescue the mutants from. So there is a nice little parallel there. Like, this is not a bad Gambit. For as much as we sit there and complain about how that's not Deadpool, this actually isn't that far off of Gambit.
I think if you would have given him a little bit more screen time, maybe in a day, I think he's great. I think this could be revisited. If they're doing what we think they're doing and they're going full multiverse with Secret Wars, I think if they were going to pull any random one that needs an extra shot, I think he would do pretty good at it. Unfortunately, I do think they found their new Gambit and he's going to do fantastic. But this is a forgotten but really good entry in that character's history.
Yeah. Thanks to Channing Tatum seeing the Marvel Sparkle Circle.
Yeah. In a deleted scene that was put out on Instagram, it did make, whatever. I'm hoping he comes back, but that was just a very strange pick for me.
Will.i.am as John Wraith, so your Kirkland brand Nightcrawler. Your thoughts?
He delivered every line with all of this, like the seriousness of somebody who had read the script 20 minutes before he did a take. I just don't understand. I understand he's a fan. I've heard that and read that before, that he's a big Marvel guy. His music's good. I like the Black Eyed Peas. He just doesn't do well here. I'm sorry. For some of the serious things they talk about, him and the Blob and Wolverine have a good sit down and talk about how their task force was basically tasked with finding mutants, delivering them to Stryker, and then Stryker would experiment on them. And he's talking about like seeing the death of children basically, and yeah, I wish I could forget some of that too. Like it's read really bad. Like it's not, this is one where the actor was not up to snuff on it. I'm sorry. He's great. Sure, he's a great person. He's just not a very good X-Man.
I mean, I like the fact that they at least kept him and Blob together and that he's trying to help Blob kind of work through his problems.
Yeah, I like that. I like that little thing. Like, hey, don't say anything about his weight. I thought that was cute. Unfortunately, that is my least favorite scene in this entire thing for reasons we'll get to later. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I couldn't get with him anytime when he was trying to get serious. I just didn't believe him. It seemed like it was a little bit phoned in. And I say this a lot. I'm not going to get into every time it happens because it's just too much of a nerd rabbit hole to go down. That's not how teleportation works. His powers aren't how teleportation works. Sabretooth can't just grab onto your spine and keep you from teleporting. That's not how I was so upset about that, irrationally angry watching the movie with how many of the superpowers just had weird little loopholes in them, and like the healing factors too. Like there's just certain things where I was like, that isn't how that's supposed to work. There's a scene where he's trying to fight Sabretooth and he goes to disappear, and Sabretooth just physically like puts his hand inside of his body and grabs onto his spine. And as he's trying to teleport, his skeleton is left in its place so he can't bamf out of existence. When has that ever been a thing? Like,
I mean, Is it a cool moment? Yes. Does it make sense? No.
No.
I mean, yes, we are talking about a superhero film and not everything needs to make sense, but we already know what a teleporter does. We know we've had Nightcrawler. And the thing
Exactly.
is, it's not
it would be
like
different if we didn't have the precedent already set that in this universe, this is how that works.
And let's be honest, Nightcrawler going after the president in the White House is one of the coolest freaking scenes in all of the X-Men films. Maybe even cooler than definitely better than the second Quicksilver slow-mo scene, but it's on par with the first one.
It's a hard toss-up between Quicksilver and Nightcrawler. I think you're right.
But I think Nightcrawler gets the nudge because they did it way earlier in the X-Men universe when the CGI wasn't necessarily always there. Like, it still holds up to today.
Yeah. A lot of those movies still hold up to today. Even with some of the effects that are very old, they still look good.
Okay, since you said this, before we get on with some of the characters, need to talk about some of this. Because the CGI in this is so not... Like, this is the worst example of Wolverine's claws that ever Wolverine.
Ever. Especially the bone claws. Especially before he gets the adamantium and he has the bone claws. It's looking pretty rough. And Emma Frost looks like a disco ball when she activates her powers later on in the movie. She, big surprise reveal at like I said, the third act made some choices. And to bring in Cyclops and Emma Frost and to have her look like, a Fortnite skin was a very wild choice.
I mean, even when Logan's at the farmhouse and he's looking at his claws really for the first time, that looks like
looks bad. Looks really, and you had already done it. You had done it for 3 movies. I'm gonna get mad. I knew it was gonna happen, like it did with Batman versus Superman. But like I said, there's just so many times where you're like, "What do you do? How did it get to this?" You had everything written out. You had the golden ticket. It was all the motion was there. The momentum from the previous movies was there. You already knew what to do. You've written this character 3 times. How does it muck up so bad when we get to the point where he gets a solo?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where if the first X-Men film had the claws and they didn't look that good and then they got better and better, you can accept that because that is the developing of the technology and what it takes to make that look.
You had CGI in the first X-Men movie that looked way better than some of the stuff in this one.
Yeah.
When Senator Kelly turns to jelly in the first one, it looks better than some of the CGI that was done in this one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we sit there and we poke fun at like She-Hulk and how it's not necessarily the best, CGI, but looks a hell of a lot better than this. That's for sure.
Way better. And it had Yellow Suit Daredevil, so it gets a little bit of a pass from me.
Yeah. Kevin Durant as Fred Dukes / Blob. And this is a weird character to put into this.
Because apparently he's not a mutant. It's never really said in the movie if he's a mutant or not, because in the books, his power was being big and indestructible. But he doesn't get big and indestructible until he's done being in the military and being a mutant mercenary. So I don't know if it's ever... I went back and rewatched a couple of scenes, and I cannot remember them ever mentioning that he is a mutant. So I don't know if it's just glossed over. And so what is his mutant power at the beginning of all of this?
I mean, if that's the case, really, most of the people at the hot dog eating competition are going to be mutants as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So what, at the beginning of the movie, what was he doing on the team? Because the Blob's power has always been big, indestructible ball kind of thing. So at the beginning of the movie, it kind of doesn't make any sense that he's in shape and a military guy. What is his mutant power there? We never see it in action. So it's like, did he just get that huge over time because of his mutant ability? And why is he sensitive about it if that's his power? There's just so many things wrong with Blob in this, especially because in the books, I don't know if you've read any of the Blob comics. The Blob is actually ridiculously dark in the books and cannibalized one of the X-Men at one point, and it was super dark and ridiculously crazy. So to see the fall from grace from that storyline to this is wild.
The problem with some of these comic book characters, and maybe this is just a personal standpoint on this, but bear with me. certain comic book characters feel like they only work in certain properties. If you took Blob and you put him in a Deadpool film,
Fantastic.
it would work because it would just be jokes for Deadpool to just be riffing on it all day, and that's kind of works. Colossus kind of works in Deadpool because he's the straight man to Deadpool's just off the wallness.
100%.
There are some comic book characters that just should not be done in live action, and definitely not in a movie that takes itself seriously. X-Men Origins Wolverine takes itself seriously. Blob is not a serious live action character.
No, I think that's an amazing way to put it. It just, he doesn't match the tone. You know what I mean? There's other X-Men that wouldn't match. Jubilee wouldn't work in this.
No.
Would it be great to see Jubilee in live action? Absolutely. Would it be great to see her in this? No, it was better in Apocalypse. Like there's just certain situations where the characters fit in, and Blob was a wild choice because even when you go back to the X task force that Stryker had from the comic books, Blob was never in there. No. So I don't get it. This is another one where it's just like, were you trying to market something? Were you going for action figures? What was the point of shoehorning this particular power set into this movie?
You would have been better off putting Puck in there.
Honestly, I think Puck would have worked, yeah. Because at least there's some precedent there and there's some connection through Alpha Flight. But we need an Alpha Flight movie. Don't even get me started on that. But
Dominic Monaghan, who played Bolt, not here for a long time, but actually not that bad.
No, that's what I was kind of thinking as well. Not any really big scenes for him either, just more of like an exposition machine and to help everybody else move forward and to get to other things. Wasn't really enough there for me to make a complaint either. So I'll pass, I guess, just from lack of a sample size.
I mean, someone's got to be the first to die. And,
yeah, exactly.
You know, I think I like the idea of a mutant once the contract is done and once he's out of the team gets work with a traveling circus.
It makes sense. It does on paper make sense.
Yeah. And the fact that you can tell he's down on his luck. You can tell he's just getting by. So it's almost like an acceptance that death is coming and it might actually be a relief.
Yeah, more of like a plot device than a character. But in that way, you kind of can't fault him for anything because he does play it well. And the scene where he gets kind of tracked down is good. You feel the fear for sure. You definitely see that he's very nervous when Creed comes to the door. And he plays it well, but just not enough on-screen time for me to rave or rant about it.
Daniel Henney, who played Agent Zero. I mean, cool gunplay scenes and whatnot. And not a bad task man for Stryker. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, it's very much not the schmuck. That's not the word I'm thinking of, but a very henchman vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Like very good at what it is, which is just the hired gun, the Ajax from Deadpool, kind of the same vibe to it. You are cannon fodder, go kind of thing. And does it very well. Good actor, been in a bunch of other stuff where he kind of plays the same character. So it's kind of what he's a professional at. So no, I think he was good. He was passable. Just another kind of body to stack up at the end with Wolverine, but really good.
I mean, as I'm watching him though, and just hear me out on this, you tell me that Daniel Henney, rather than be Agent Zero, and this is Fox in the 2000s, so they could have done this. Wouldn't he have been better as Mr. Negative?
Oh, that would have been, yeah, he looks bang on the part. He'd be a great Spider-Man villain. I think Mr. Negative is actually one of the Spider-Man villains they haven't really touched for a movie or show as much. He was in the games, but I think there's a lot that could be done with that, especially with visual effects as they are now. They've already kind of stretched their legs with Doctor Strange bit. So you could definitely take him and make him a Mr. Negative to be afraid of.
Oh, absolutely. And, we still have a Spider-Man 4 film that needs to happen, and we definitely need a good villain. And Mr. Negative would be something new that we haven't seen in live action.
Mm-hmm. Something new, and maybe they could do it a little bit better justice than they did Mysterio. So
I have thoughts, but yeah, it's Far From Home is, I think, the least of the weaker of the Hollands. Even though it's still really good, it's the weaker of the Hollands. Lynn Collins as Kayla Silverfox. Your thoughts?
She was one of the bright spots in the movie. I think she played it really well. Again, another really good actor, another really good actress, which played a good character who was given bad decisions. Like, I didn't understand the whole how can Logan and her make up and be cool right after she just revealed to him that she was lying the entire relationship. That kind of stymied the character for me a little bit. So you fake your own death, make him go on this whole rampage for revenge, only to find out you were secretly working for the people who were trying to kill you the entire time. And you make up because, oh, my sister's in here, so I had to protect my sister. So all that stuff I did to you is null and void. I don't buy that. And the comic book Wolverine would not buy that either.
No. I will say that as far as on-screen love interest for Wolverine.
Great.
Oh, yeah.
Plays it really good, gives him the name. The opening bit set in Canada is really good. They do a really good job of painting the white picket fence picture. Great actress, good character, very comic lore accurate. Just decisions were made that don't make any sense.
Yeah. I mean, did better than Tao Okamoto, who played Mariko in The Wolverine.
Yes.
I thought the pairing worked well. And I mean, we were getting some Alpha Flight vibes from her and from the whole setting. And I think that's one of the saving graces of this film. Put it in Canada, make us think that it's Alpha Flight, because this is before, or supposed to be before, the first X-Men film. So it makes sense that it takes place up in Canada.
Yeah, because at the end of the movie, of course, he gets shot in the head with an adamantium bullet, and somehow that makes it so his brain doesn't heal properly, even though that's not how healing factors work, and wipes his memory. So status quo is regained for the X-Men franchise. I would kill for an Alpha Flight movie. They should have made this X-Men Origins Alpha Flight, and then it would be number one with a bullet.
Since we're talking about plot holes, though, and by the way, dear listeners, if you haven't seen this movie, too late. They fake her death so that he will submit himself to the adamantium bonding process. And to fake her death, Sabretooth covers her with blood. We don't know where the blood's coming from, but covers her in blood. It ain't her blood, but have we forgotten that Logan can smell really well?
Yep. Not only can he smell really well, but they injected a chemical into her to make her seem dead. Can he not smell the chemical either?
Yeah.
Because then later on in the movie, we all know it, and we've all seen it in several movies, he can smell people like hundreds of feet away coming into a building. He'll just stop and be like, somebody's here. So it is one of those things. It's a lot like Superman in a way, where they neuter the hearing sometimes for the sake of the plot. But in this one, it's pretty obvious. It would be very easy for Wolverine to tell if the woman that he loved was dead.
Right. It would smell like not her blood.
Yes.
Nah. Just nah.
So also, did he not go to the funeral?
Right?
Did he not keep track of any of this? Because there is time gaps. There is jumps where he had to go places and he had to do air travel and book a flight just like the rest of us to get to certain places. So you're telling me not once did he check in and make sure that everything's going good with his dead lovers affairs and stuff I don't know. Maybe I'm nitpicking here. That feels like I'm nitpicking, but at the same time, it's because it's based in such a plot hole, like you said.
Yeah. There are a couple of other mutants in this film. Tim Pocock, who played young Cyclops, not a bad version of him.
No, but they committed the cardinal sin. They showed us Cyclops and Sabretooth, but they didn't show us the fight.
Exactly.
We flash to the scene and the hall's destroyed and everything's burnt. And he's laying there with Sabretooth, but they don't give us what we want. It wouldn't have been that much to give us just a little bit. You made Wolverine and Sabretooth fight 30 seconds. Give us just a little bit. I know it would never be a match because he's still a teenager. He hasn't met, Professor Xavier. He's still trying to figure out how it works when you can't open your eyes in public. But give me a fight scene in the school. Give me Cyclops versus Sabretooth as he's trying to show he's not a slouch even now before he becomes a member of the team. I think the actor did great. I think for what he got, it was a lot like some of the other characters. He didn't necessarily get enough time to really stretch his legs and show off, but I did love the scene where they're escaping the facility and he gets the message of go left, and he kind of takes the lead of the team and does that. So I think it was a good Cyclops for what limited Cyclops it was.
Yeah. And then of course you had Tanya Tazi, who played Emma Frost. Now, apparently people on the X side of things said, well, it's not really Emma Frost. Well, who the hell is it? It's Emma Frost.
Her skin turned to diamond and deflected bullets. And she's with Scott Summers the entire time she's on screen, they get married. That's his love interest for the better part of 20 years in the comic books. So who is it if it's not Emma Frost?
Exactly. I mean, I think it would have been even just a little subtleness of like they were holding each other's hand to help, just to lead them out of the building. Cause you can sit there and go, oh, that's where it started. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I will say, I think Tanya Tozzi did a decent job with what they gave her. I mean, we can't blame her for the CGI as far as the diamond
she had nothing
skin.
to do with that. She had nothing to do with that. Also, the fact that she is the sister of the Wolverine's maid love, again, another decision. It just didn't have to go like that.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be that way. Like, you could make it so she just wanted to save the kids that were in there, notwithstanding that there's any relation there. You don't have to make everything, bow back around on itself, because that's not how it was in the books.
Not everyone is a Skywalker. That's what it boils down to. I will ask you though, who is the better Emma Frost, Tanya Tozzi or January Jones?
January Jones.
Really?
I think January Jones for sure.
Even though she might be one of the weaker parts of First Class?
Weaker parts of First Class, but that wasn't her fault. She looked the part, and I think she did well, but that was written strangely. That wasn't necessarily her fault. I think she looks the part very well. Emma Frost is a difficult X-Men to write, because it's one of those ones that people aren't going to be as familiar with in public domain realm. You're going to have to be a comic fan to really be familiar with Emma Frost. She isn't in a lot of other mainstream X-Men stuff other than the books and some of the movies. She wasn't a huge player in the show for very long. Even in the new show, X-Men 97, she only just got her powers in X-Men 97. So it's one of those characters where you almost kind of have to know a lot more background information to make a judgment call on that. And I don't think there was enough information of her put in front of some of the writers of X-Men First Class for them to gear it out. I'm not necessarily calling that January Jones's problem. I do think she's the better Emma Frost. And the CGI was much better too.
Oh, definitely. So, you can't go wrong with that. No.
So unfortunately, that is some points in her favor. When she did power up, it looked a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, there was the X-Men anime series that came out and they put her more in that. And if I remember correctly, I think she was also in the Wolverine and the X-Men animated series.
Yes. Both deep cuts, both great shows.
Oh, Wolverine and the X-Men for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The anime was way better than it had any right to be, quite honestly, especially for the time it came out. That was a big stab in a random direction for Marvel, and I think it worked out quite well.
Very much so. We talked a little bit about the CGI and the special effects looking a little unfinished. But there's one scene, and I'm looking at this, I'm like, this feels so cobbled together at the last minute that I don't even know why it's here. But it's Patrick Stewart de-aged at the end to come rescue the mutants from Alkali Lake. Like, this looks like a dream sequence the way it's shot.
It doesn't make any sense. Why is he there? You could have had them get out, and then later in the movie at the very end, just have him meeting them in the hospital. Anything. How did he know to be there? How did he know this was happening? Why didn't he help with all the other crazy bull going on? If he knew about this happening, why didn't he intervene sooner? It just, again, it's another questions on top of questions about the decisions made.
I mean, I'm fine with him or at least figuring out what's happening because he's freaking Professor X and he does have Cerebro back at the mansion. I'm fine with that. But it just, and especially as the mutants are running towards the helicopter, it looks so out of place, not just with everything else that's surrounding Alkali Lake, but it looks so badly green screened and matte painted together.
That makes me think it was a very late in the game decision.
Yeah.
That makes me think, okay, so we need somebody, we want a big like power, because really not a lot of cameos from the other X-Men movies in this. Like, there's not a lot of mention of what happens after. There's not a lot of, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge that ties into later things, right? They very much did focus on the Weapon X stuff and made this kind of self-contained, but just a weird direction to go in.
I mean, keep in mind too, this is also the year after Iron Man came out. And you compare the CGI from Iron Man to the CGI in this, and there is no reason why a superhero film in 2009, knowing what Iron Man looked like, should come out looking this PlayStation.
Iron Man still holds up in the CGI department in a lot of aspects. The fights with the Ironmonger, people forget that is all CGI. Mm-hmm. And it still looks good today. You can still go back and rewatch them and check your brain and forget that it's 2008.
I mean, even the Incredible Hulk looks better than this.
Yes, not Ang Lee's though.
No. Well, that was 2003 though.
Yeah, it's true. And this is kind of comparable to that, if we're being quite honest.
Yeah. I mean, 2003, it's your first time doing a CGI Hulk. Because before it'd be like, all right, let's paint Lou Ferrigno green. But we bought it. We were fine with that.
Because you know what? Because they did it so well actor-wise that it worked. That's the thing. And you knew there was nothing else really they could do at that time. These guys don't have any excuse because you know the technology's there.
Absolutely. And like you said, the first X-Men films already looked good.
Yes, they had it. They already had the claws down. They already did this 3 times. Like,
just bad. Just bad. All right. It's time. Lyle, who is your MVP of X-Men Origins Wolverine?
it's not a surprise because the whole reason this movie isn't completely shat upon is because Hugh Jackman is Wolverine so good that he can carry a bad movie just off the back of him being so close to the comic book character. So the MVP was always going to be Hugh, because without him, this movie is worthless. This movie falls apart. Watching him as Wolverine is one of the parts that you can check your brain at the door and enjoy damn near anything, I think. You put Hugh Jackman as Wolverine in it, you can have a pretty bad movie, and you can still enjoy the parts that he is in. There's a couple good spots here. Him riding the motorcycle through the woods was pretty cool. That chase scene with the helicopter, even though it ended in the stupid ignites it with his claw and then blows up while he's like slow motion walking away. The leading up to that was cool. Some of the fight scenes are cool. The breakout scene when he breaks out of the tub, when he had the adamantium injected into him, shot for shot, that was amazing. Like, that was really, really good. But it's because you're leaning into what makes the movie good, and that is Hugh Jackman as Wolverine.
All right. I mean, and yes, Hugh Jackman is my MVP as well. But I'm going to throw you a curveball here.
Okay.
Because Hugh Jackman being your MVP is kind of the cop-out.
And you probably knew I was going to pick it.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to take Hugh Jackman off the board, and I'm going to re-ask you, Wolverine aside, who is your MVP of X-Men Origins Wolverine?
Danny Houston as Stryker. I think it's Danny Houston as Stryker. I think that's something you could revisit easily. I think it's a shame that he hasn't gotten a kick at anything else comic book related because of this. Maybe it's because I'm a big fan of him as well. I'm a huge American Horror Story fan, and Freak Show is my favorite season, and he is one of the integral parts of that. But I just think he plays a very, very good villain in this. He's a little moo-ha-ha-ha for my liking. Like, he is very evil for the sake of being evil because we don't know what the end goal is with all this. But he plays every scene that he's in. You can tell that he's actually given it 110%. And he is very believable. And the way he talks and interacts with Creed, when Creed's begging to get the same procedure done to him, to give him the adamantium bones, and he's like, "You're not going to survive it. I'm not going to do this. You're my favorite. You're my best soldier. I'm not doing this to you." And is kind of laughing at him, like as if like, you got to calm down, man. Like, he's really, really good. So I think it's Danny. Danny's my MVP other than Hugh.
I will agree as well. Danny Houston is my backup MVP if Hugh Jackman is off the board. Because really, the comic book movies are made and live and die, not just by the heroes, but also by the villains. And you have to have... I would
say the villain's the most important.
Oh, absolutely.
I would say it's easy to get the hero right if you follow the formula. But the villain is the thing where I've said this a lot, actually. I talked about this in film school. The villain is always where the filmmakers seem to have some more play, right? They seem to have more of a clay to mold around whatever their version of this movie is going to be, right? Because the hero, you can't change too much or people will just flat out not watch it, right? The villain, you can do a lot of... Look how many different versions of the Riddler we've gotten. All of them in their own right, pretty good, right? So the villain, I think, is the most important part of a comic book movie because it's the driving force behind the entire plot. And in an X-Men movie specifically, a lot of the villains are congressmen or are government people. Like, other than Magneto and Nimrod, you have your big, final boss style bad guys that are trying to throw an asteroid at the Earth or something like that. But for a lot of the origin stories, specifically of the X-Men, the bad guy's usually just a human that hates mutants. It's a racist is usually the villain, which is the villain in real life too. But to take a character that's like that and make them as good as Danny did here, that's hard to do. It's really hard to do. Senator Kelly couldn't do it in the first X-Men movie. He was a very uninteresting villain plot point in that, simply because he was just this, I don't know if there's a word for hating on people's genetics. Geneticist, maybe? Something like that. But it's hard to take a person who just has a grievance against a certain kind of people and make them a superhero villain. So for them to do it with Danny and make it really good, it's a feather in his cap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, dear X-Men films, if you're going to do it right, let's get the Friends of Humanity in there.
Yes.
But I mean, like, X-Men 97 proved you can take, a story and like really flush it out well in 2024, because X-Men 97, I'm sorry, is one of the best animated series of all time when it comes to superhero shows.
I think it is. I think it's taken the spot away from Batman the Animated Series from me, which I never thought in a million years I'd ever be able to say, especially something new. But the thing about that, I'm going to go on a bit of a side note. The reason why the Friends of Humanity worked in the X-Men show is because they had stolen Sentinel technology right from the get-go. I think it would have been hard to make them work in a movie like this, because how would you make them a threat? How would you make a bunch of guys with AK-47s a threat against the Wolverine? Unless you already had that pre-set out path of, no, they have Sentinel tech, they've stolen it, they have this thing that's specifically targeted toward mutants. That's why they're a big danger. But I wish they would make an X-Men movie that had the Friends of Humanity as the main, not a supporting villain, not the background, like, fodder enemies for them to take out and look cool like they do in the show. Give me a full 2-hour movie where it's just these guys are taking out a plan to try to get rid of the mutant gene using the tech they've stolen from other villains down the road.
Almost like they're pooling.
Don't you do this.
I just like to trigger Lyle on some of these because I know.
You knew this was going to, and I told you when I suggested this, it's going to make me mad. Watching it's going to make me angry because my favorite Marvel property is the X-Men. Always has been, always will be. Love Cap, love Iron Man. The whole MCU is fantastic. It's an art form, what the Russo brothers and Kevin Feige have done. They've quite literally changed cinema in a way and made it so everybody's trying to make their own universe. But man alive, were those first 3 X-Men movies like lightning in a bottle for like 10-year-old me.
By the way, dear listeners, if you are intrigued about what we've talked about with Hulk versus, I just want to put this into perspective for you, because Hulk versus Wolverine, that's that half of the DVD is freaking fantastic. You want to know how fantastic it is? It has a tomatometer of 100%.
And it's better than this movie. The
Oh,
first half of that Hulk versus, the Hulk versus Wolverine half of Hulk versus is better than X-Men Origins Wolverine.
I mean, the popcorn meter sits at 67%, but
They're wrong. They're incorrect, and that's okay.
Yeah. I cannot believe I'm saying this. The critics were right when it came to Hulk versus.
100%. And I think it's just because the animated superhero, that wasn't the time for animated superhero movies. That was very much a no, we want live action or nothing. I think that's more of the sign of the times, the popcorn meter.
Yeah, no. And Hulk versus definitely worth the watch, especially if you want a fantastic Wolverine and Deadpool story too.
Yep. 100%. And they definitely don't just take a character and take away all of his basic plot points that make him the character that he is, like they do here.
All right, Lyle, thank you so much for this. Now, please remind our listeners out there where they can find you out there on the interwebs and what you're up to.
You can find me on 640 Toronto on Let's Talk with Danny Stover, Radio Player Canada app, or if you're near Toronto on the AM radio dial, but it's always easier to find us on the Radio Player Canada app. You can listen to us anywhere there, 7 to 10, Monday through Friday, and the podcast version coming out real soon as well.
All right, Lyle, thank you so much. And even though I trigger you with some of these movies, there is always a spot for you on the show.
And I'll be back.
Because you're a glutton for punishment.
Always.
All right, listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is a movie out there that you think is unfairly maligned or is just so bad that there is no way in Alkali Lake that we can find anything good to say about it, hit us up on social media at NotThatBadCast or go to our website at NotThatBadCast.com. And remember, at the end of the year, we are going to be taking a look at movies from 2024, but not the good ones, on our Grading on a Curve end of year special. You know that's coming.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that in the back of my head. I was like, it's getting close to Christmas time, and that usually means.
And to quote Kurt Russell, I got a list.
I bet you do.
All right, guys, that's Lyle. I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is It's Not That Bad, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.
The Jeremiah Show is proudly featured on Pantheon Podcasts. Don't miss an exciting episode of The Jeremiah Show. You're invited to the world of pop culture, music icons, and food gods. Find Jeremiah at thejeremiahshow.com or on all social networks and back catalogs at Linktree, Jeremiah D. Higgins.
I am Miles Zuniga from Fastball.
And we are a girl named Tom.
Hi, I'm Marielle Hemingway.
Hi, this is Chef Melissa King from Top Chef All Stars.
Hi there, everybody. This is Ann H.
Hi, I'm Shadow Stevens. I'm having a great time on The Jeremiah Show, the greatest show in the history of the world.
The Jeremiah Show is brought to you by Evolve Entertainment Network, Pantheon Podcasts, and Radio Candy Media.
I do hope you enjoyed that interview. I'm sorry that Jeremiah is so hopeless. I did made a real effort to sort of get through the sludge and the drudgery and the cliches and the second-rate ideas. I hope I didn't disappoint you too much. And as far as Jeremiah is concerned, do write in, because if you do, we can do something about this.